one is the previous slide. Next slide.
Hi everyone, so I'm Sachin, and as Kat said, I'm the biodiversity technician for the Northern Drakensberg landscape. Okay, and today I'm going to speak to you about a long-term vegetation project that we implemented across all EFTEON sites, if it can be applicable, and hopefully it can work in thickets, and hopefully be incorporated into the Eastern Cape landscape. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we do know that everything is changing across the globe. Vegetation, can you hear me now? Okay, cool. We know that everything is changing across the world, and it's from a big scale to a small scale, but everything is affected. And this could be from changes to rainfall, to fire regimes, to herbivory, to agricultural practices, and now elevated CO2. And we know that global change is predicted to increase carbon stored in African woodlands. So we want to quantify the storage and this change. So FTON aims to quantify these changes with long-term monitoring in our instrumented landscapes. So there's a protocol that was developed. It's called SEOSAW. It's a social ecological observatory for studying African woodlands. And the long-term goal for SEOSAW is to understand the response of African woodlands to change. So what is CSO? So CSO is a network of scientists and people and researchers that have come together to create a protocol that we use in African woodlands that can be repeated and hopefully can be used. It's mainly done in woodlands, savannas, and dry forests, but hopefully also thicket. And the main purpose of CSO is to connect researchers and their data and to facilitate collaboration using standardized methods and a curated and open access data set. So these are some of the key outputs for CSO that you can once it's implemented, you can have an ecosystem structure output. You have standardized methods for plot design and resampling, and it can be turned into a long-term vegetation remeasurement plot. So there's a series of protocols that have been created, from the bottom down, and these are all interlinked. The ones where the asterisks are currently in process and hopefully will be available this year. I know the shrubs is coming online soon, and I'm going to talk about the trees and herbaceous one. But they all use existing methods that have been modified and linked together. And it's quite an open organization and community where if you have a change, you can contact them and they can modify the protocol for your region. And it's quite an easy data collection method. It does require some learning at the beginning, but it does move quite quickly. And everything is available on the site, from all the protocols to data sheets to what you may need. And the best part of it is that it can be used for a long-term project. So it can be a really important monitoring tool. So the top-hand corner, which is left, yeah, left, is our FTN sites. And this map represents basically seesaw's distribution in Africa. The blue represents single plots, the orange represents permanent plots, the green represents woodlands in Africa, and you see there are three dots in South Africa. One is at Benfontein, which is our FTON site, and that was the first CSO site for FTON. The other two are in the Lowveld in Kruger. But you can see we plan to implement it in areas where there is no green or woodland to see if it will work and it can be adapted. So the first part is just the woody vegetation protocol. It's quite straightforward. It's just tagging trees within a predetermined plot. It's basic. You want to quantify long-term changes. You want to understand growth, mortality, and productivity, and link these together to hopefully understand change in the environment over a long-term scale. So the plot design, depending on what you want to use it for, it can be a quarter plot, half a plot, or 1 hectare plot. 1 hectare plot is preferred for a long-term study because of the size of it. And basically, within each plot, you want to survey your land and see what's happening and develop your own questions. So if you want to know why trees are dying or why there's no new recruitment, why is it specifically dominated by one type of plant, tree, succulent, or shrub, you will have to survey your entire plot and determine how you want to include these specific type of vegetation. So that's how you can create your own type of height you want to measure the plants at, and the like diameter you want to measure them with. So depending on if it's a large tree system, and there's lots of large trees, you might want to make a bigger threshold for diameter and a greater height. But if your tree system is just an encroach system with lots of small plants, you can lower it down. And everything within the system is tagged with a galvanized um, tag, so you can repeat monitor it. So there's a specific standard where you will want to measure the tree and tag the tree, and like how it's done over there. And then you can do repeats of it. You just go back to the exact same tree, and you measure 20 centimeters below the tag point. So it can be repeated, and the only thing else that is included at this point is its height, and then each tree or shrub has a GPS point. And then including with the woody vegetation, we have a herbaceous protocol, which draws heavily from the global grassy group protocol. And it's basically, they aim to characterize species composition and richness of frequency. And that's a layout for a 0.525 hectare plot that can also be made into a permanent plot. It includes 21 one meter diameter plots, which can be made permanent. And this increase in area of smaller plots compared to one singular plot means that you include more species and also rarer species in the plot. And the main the main drawback from the, I mean not drawback, but the important point is that you voucher everything within the plot. And it's a straightforward plot. It takes a bit of time to learn, but everything is available online. And it's a simple data set sheet made up of 3 sheets, one for metadata to record what you have on the land, whether it's your GPS point, your land type, what succulents you have available, and then functional groups, grasses, trees, spiny plants, succulents, and lastly, just a species composition. So this is the design for the GGG. It can be modified to what your needs are, and also according to your plot size, whether you want to make it a permanent plot, a one-shot plot. It can be a nested design, it can be a split design, or it can be a 0.25 plot. In this plot design, the plot does go outside your marked area, but you can still include the extra plots in it outside your demarcated area. So EFTEON's plot design is a bit different. It still focuses on the 1 hectare plot for a long-term monitoring, but as Kat said, everything is centered around a EC tower. And below, that's our EC tower at Spienkop, and below the picture below that there is the footprint of the EC tower at Benfontein. You see that the footprint is larger than 1 hectare. So ideally, as I said, it's a 1 hectare plot, and to incorporate the measurements from the EC tower, 4 cardinal plots were added in the north, south, east, west. So we get the full idea of what's really happening in the system with our eddy covariance tower. So this is the layout. This is Spienkop Dam, our Spienkop site. On that side, in the center, is our eddy covariance tower in the first plot. Around the 4 cardinal plots are the additional 1 hectare plots. And within each of those 5 plots, we tagged every single woody tree that we could, that met our threshold. And additionally, which we haven't done as yet, is that we're going to do within each of the 5 hectare plots is going to be our GGG plots. So within the Kaizen EFTEON landscape, there's 2 landscapes. There's a northern Drakensberg and a Maputoland coastal plain landscape. All 3 are, both are remarkably different. And the goal is to do it across all the landscapes. So right now, we're only starting with Spienkop Dam, which is a savanna which is encroached already. It's protected, but it has a history of disturbance, and there's several large animals. The next site is going to be our MCP site, which is a communal site, which is increasing in like woody vegetation, has a variable fire regime, and there's resource harvesting, and a drop in water table. And lastly is our capped peak site, which is a montane site, protected, low herbivory, and a well-managed fire system. So I only finished this 2 weeks ago, so I didn't analyze all the data. but it's been a remarkable site. Within our 5 hectare plots, we sampled 1,037 trees, which equated to 1,879 stems tagged across all 5 plots. We now know that it's an acacia-dominated system. I still call it acacia, but it's mainly made up of one tree, which is Acacia cru, which is an encroacher across South Africa, and it's only present in 2 cohort groups. Um, Individuals that are at my hip and individuals that are 3 meters high. There was only 3 present mature trees in the system. Nilotica is a bush climb starter and only present in 3 cohort groups: immatures, mature trees, and dead cohort groups. And Cebriana only present as immature 1 meter trees. So in total, there was only 13 species sample. 13 trees only found in the plots, but in this entire 1,337 trees, only 2 trees were excluded because I couldn't get to them. They were too thorny. It's quite a difficult environment. It doesn't look like it's very thorny and encroached, but when you get into there, it's thorns everywhere. And so besides us tagging the trees, doing species identification and height, for each tree we included metadata such as um, number of stems, because most of the trees it's a fire-prone system, or it could be and there's large herbivores. We included damage from insects. The main thing for our environment was longhorn beetles. They can severely impact a tree. And thorn expression. Some trees just show phenotypic expression for more thorns than other trees. And seed set. So this year we had a really bad seed set in our entire Spierenkop region. We don't know why. And for this site, we chose to include our threshold at 1.3 meters, which included majority of the trees, but there was a lot of trees that were stunted from grazing from previous fires. So we also measured trees at 0.3, and our threshold to include the majority of trees was 30 millimeters. And we hope to redo this entire sampling 3 to 5 years. It might be staggered because this took me 8 weeks to complete. So it's quite a large chunk of time from when we started at the beginning of January. So what's next? So we hope to complete our herbaceous sampling in summer, and we're going to hopefully add in a communal site in the northern Drakensberg. And there's something that's been happening at our Spierenkop site, because woody trees often mean less grazing for farmers. There's been large-scale poisoning across the landscape. So Spierenkop is a reserve that's surrounded by farmers, and across the landscape, we see planes flying and spraying herbicide, killing all the trees. You often see major dead zones and everything. But the coolest thing is that I want to know where SEOSAW can work in thicket. It's a protocol that can still be adapted and changeable. You can include things, you can exclude things to see if it can work for your landscape and for your need. And I just want to say, it's my very first time coming to Thicket Farm, my first time driving down here, my first time in an Addo. I'm more familiar with this sort of landscape, and this is what Susie spoke about yesterday, which is drive to yellow thicket. So when I got here first, I thought this landscape was the same that we have here, because it's mirrored in so many aspects: the euphorbias, the speckworm, the boschias, the karoo, the plumbago, all these plant assemblages. It's found here. Even looks so much like thicket. The only thing in KZN, it's in a rain shadow, but it's hilly. It has the hills, the stones. It's only plowed in the floodplains, but also mainly untouched and also undersampled. So it was nice to have a speak and say that there are differences and they aren't the same. And thank you.
Thanks very much, Sachin.